916. You know how we do it over here. Positivity, motivation, never settle for average. I have a special guest with me today, Cody, getting down from Stranger by the Hour podcast. Man, he's been on Fresh Out. If you haven't seen him on Fresh Out, go check out our interviews over there. This guy has a hell of a story. He's been through a lot in life, and I like to bring people to the platform who add value. And Cody definitely brings value to the platform. Cody, for those who don't know, can you kind of talk a little bit about like your podcast and kind of like your background a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for having me over here, man. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy our talks over there on Fresh Out. It's always hilarious. So my background basically, and kind of how I got to what I'm doing now is I grew up in the outskirts of Los Angeles, you know, like the high desert. So like the suburbs out there, Lancaster, Palmdale, kind of out there near like the Lockheed Skunk Works and all those weird planes and stuff. And so basically fast forward, I joined the Marines in 1998. You know, it was kind of a good way to get out of that town. And I was kind of looking for the heroic journey. You know, I was kind of looking for a pull from my normal life into something else. So I joined the Marine Corps. And quickly through the Marine Corps, I joined the infantry initially. And so I did that for a few years. And I invaded Iraq in 2003 as an infantry guy. And then after that, I switched over to being an explosive ordnance disposal guy, so bomb tech. So I used to disarm bombs. I like that movie, The Hurt Locker. Switched over to doing that in 2004. I went back to Iraq in 2004 and participated in the battle there called Phantom Fury. It's kind of like one of the big textbook ones, like Way City in Vietnam, or like, you know, nothing as big as World War II, or even actually the Russian-Ukraine war now, but it was pretty big at the time. 2006, I got selected for the Marine Corps Special Operations Command, and so I entered, or MARSOC, or the Marine Raiders. So I became a Marine Raider in 2006, and I stayed there until 2016. After I got out of the Marine Corps in 2016, I started doing some civilian contracting, and basically for the exact same unit, and did a couple more deployments for a total, I've been to Afghanistan 3 times, Iraq 5 times, and 1 time to the like the southern Philippines, where the like the Islamic terrorists were getting busy down in the southern Philippines. And so, you know, that kind of led, you know, fast forward to like 2020, I got back from Iraq. January 2020 was my last tour there, and they had assassinated Soleimani like pretty much a few days before I left, you know, so things were kind of hairy. And I get back to America in time for like COVID to kick off. Now this is on YouTube, so we'll just kind of like, so COVID kicks off, right? And that madness happens. And so my partner on the podcast, Aaron, and I, he's a retired Marine sniper, Marine special operator, critical skills operator. We get stuck in an office at the MARSOC building together. Now, during this time in our lives, we had been trained by U.S. SOCOM on psychological operations, military deception, information operations. And, you know, previously we were ground pounder type dudes, you know, like that kind of like wizardry we would have considered geek stuff, you know. Actually, I still got the thing sitting on my desk right here. It's like the military deception manual, you know. So, you know, we start getting into this stuff, and we're doing it overseas. We're running these type of operations overseas, or we're helping design them for the military to run overseas. And, you know, while we were stuck in that office during the lockdowns, we just started brainstorming like, hey man, like what is really going on around here? And we just started, like, we had a big whiteboard behind us, and we would just start breaking stuff down on the whiteboard. Like we were looking at it like military planners, like, okay, hey, they're saying this. You know, my experience as an explosive ordnance disposal guy was littered with biological weapons training. So what they were saying on the news wasn't jiving with my training. Like, you know, it's one of those cognitive dissonance walls where you're like, well, wait a minute, I was training something completely different. Now you guys are saying this thing and it doesn't. So, you know, we just started looking. We started looking into it. We started doing what you're not supposed to do. We looked into it. You know, we noticed and we investigated. And we just started coming up with an assessment of what we could figure without any strange, like, I don't even want to say conspiracies, but like the closest thing to an assessment of what's going on as we could get. And so we got it. So 2021, I quit the Department of Defense cold turkey, just walked off the job because I found a farm to buy. I basically figured out that I was involved in a large scale psychological operation like in mid 2020. and I started looking for farmland to get out to land somewhere, you know. And so Aaron and I actually bought the place we're on now, which is 52 acres, like surrounded by a river, in 2021. And I cashed out of the military and moved here full time. So I've been farmsteading or homesteading for the past 2.5 years, give or take. Basically taking a farm that had been abandoned for 14 years and just bringing it back to life. You know, we got like close to 20 goats now, something like 100 different birds. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30 rabbits. I'm not quite sure. They're kind of hard to keep track of, you know? Yeah, man, we're working on building an alternate power source. We've got alternate water. And so kind of what our show is about is we do a lot of fun, like poking fun of what we call the Babylonian system or Babylon, you know, basically what's going on outside your front door is like, you know, we poke fun at that and try to use the training that we had been used to analyze a situation to figure out, is there propaganda? You know, in this message that's being delivered to me via the news, radio, whatever it is, like, you know, is there rhetoric? Are they using something like a pathos argument or an argument designed to attack your feelings when they should just be using a logical way to tell you something? So we talk a lot about that. We try to, you know, we call it breaking spells or poking holes in the narrative. And then basically try to be solutions oriented, like we call it get out of the system or GOOTS, GOOTS, get out of the system. Because essentially we do live in the matrix and it is a system of systems. And, you know, you can begin to detach yourself from those systems. I just chose physically first via moving to a homestead and then setting my sights on financially getting myself out of the system. Actually, my physical person like how far can you get out of the system, because essentially that's one of the only ways I see that, you know, we make progress in this world is we individually decide that we're not taking it anymore. Like we're just going to start our own thing.
Now, when you talk about the matrix and the system, and you know, I get flashbacks to just going through the whole prison system and seeing that matrix and waking up in there and seeing how different people see different things, even though it appears to be you're coexisting in the same reality. And in their reality, maybe they see one thing and then you see another thing. And then I read this whole book. It's about, it breaks down the matrix and just how the movie is very symbolic. And then you see how by the last Matrix movie, Neo could go in and out the Matrix. He has all this freedom, but you can still use the tools of the Matrix. And it's almost like he's like in an advanced program. Kind of like I always liked one of my favorite characters was the Monrovian in the Matrix. He would come in and pop in, then you'd go to chase him. He'd go through a door and boop, he's gone, you know, and you can make these moves. And I look at those people who are able to do that as, you know, the people who maybe have had exposure to certain knowledge. I don't want to put them on a pedestal because they're no better than us, but they just have access, and access creates opportunity. And, you know, seeing how you've been in these different places most people will never experience. Most people will never, you know, go to, you know, Iraq or Afghanistan. You know, maybe they'll go to Dubai or something for vacation, or maybe Saudi Arabia or something. But most people would have no reason to go to Afghanistan or Iraq. What was it like, you know, going to, you know, Iraq, for example? When that shit happened, I mean, I remember, you know, you know, night with it 2000. Well, I was free, and then 2000 I got locked up. But like when they invaded, and, you know, weapons of mass destruction, and then you see all the stuff, and then they made the movie Three Kings and all that, and you see all the stuff going on over there. What was it actually like, man, as far as to physically experience that? I know we see Hollywood and people, you know, they have certain things in mind. Most of these young people have no idea what it's like to be somewhere, and, you know, you're putting on a certain, you know, image or aura to protect yourself, but you're actually in a foreign land occupying. What was like, Describe that for us.
I mean, it was pretty chaotic. Is probably the best way to say it. The information wasn't great. I mean, so so I got to Kuwait in January of 2003, and we hung around our base on Kuwait until March when we invaded. So at that base, it was just tents everywhere. So if anybody's ever seen that Generation Kill show on HBO, I mean, that's a fairly accurate depiction of how things looked and went down, So, we kind of were under the impression that we were just kind of doing a show of force. Like we were just going to be in Kuwait, just sit here, Saddam would see us on the border and he'd be like, okay, well, I don't want none of that. So, we're going to stop doing whatever I was doing. So we would just do we just march around the desert, do dumb shit. But that night of that famous address where George Bush is on TV and he's like, we've given Saddam and his sons like 48 hours or something like that to get out of Iraq. Well, he was lying, right? Because like we were already moving. Like we were already moving to the border when he was saying that, hey, we're going to give these guys like 48, 96 hours, whatever it was. I was a regular infantry guy at the time, basic infantry dude. And I swear we were given close to zero information on. I knew the big sort of like roadmap plan. We call it like a big blue arrow plan, that we were supposed to secure the oil fields directly across the border. That was our first gig, and then pass that off to the British, and then we were supposed to keep pushing towards Baghdad. That's like the whole of the plan that I got. Like, hey, we're taking this highway just up the road, and I'm like, okay, great. So we get up to the border, and once again, there's not a ton of information. And I'm going into Iraq in this tiny little tank. It's an amphibious tank. It looks kind of like a metal, like Winnebago or something like that. And the thing isn't rated for any kind of like actual bullet protection. Like it'll stop like rifle bullets, but nothing, no rockets, no heavy machine guns. It ain't stopping none of that. Right. And there's like 20 of us in the back of that fucking thing, and it's dark, and we're wearing chemical suits, which kind of leads me back to that 2020 thing. Like we thought that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. So we would do drills where they would just scream out, and we would put our gas masks on back in Kuwait. And then when we invaded, we were actually wearing chemical suits. So, it looks like a snowmobile suit, but the inside of it has activated charcoal, which is supposed to help slow down chemical weapons and shit. So, there's 20 of us packed into this thing in the dark in chemical suits, like each of us wearing like 75 pounds of shit. Right. It's like, it's pretty brutal. So, the night of the invasion starts, and, once again, it's just chaotic. You can actually see artillery rounds flying through the air above you. Like when you look up with your night vision goggles, because they're using like rocket artillery, it's just a constant barrage of artillery going out. And you're like, oh, this is happening. But wherever that's landing, people are dying time now, So we get in our little tank, and we just start screaming through the border, man. And almost immediately things turned pretty retarded. I remember like the first place that we stopped was like that next morning was like an artillery place where the Iraqis the Iraqis ran away almost the entire time. Like there was a few pockets. This is where like the historians will be like, well, nuh-uh, there was the battle of whatever. I'm like, yeah, cool, man. So what? For like in actuality, almost the entirety of the Iraqis disappeared, quit. They surrendered. I mean, they saw what happened in 91, in Desert Storm. So the first place we get to is an abandoned artillery place. So we're searching around there, and we get back in our little tank and start driving, and we hit a mine. Now it's a small mine, an anti-personnel mine. So it doesn't do anything to the thing. It doesn't even blow a track. It just sounds like something huge hit the vehicle. And this is like where the chaos and the confusion comes from. So we radio that shit up. At least I think we did. From down in that little black dungeon I was in, But then, so a couple of the first casualties of the war were actually dudes that rolled in behind us from our same unit. They rolled into that exact same place, into that exact same landmine, and one dude gets his foot blown off, and another dude takes fragmentation from that mine to the shoulder. And one of those dudes ended up on Oprah later. I forgot which one it was. But like day one, day two, we're already like losing people due to miscommunications, So it was the second night that like actual like combat that I first like got into. And so the word gets passed down by the officer in the vehicle by shouting down into the back where all of us are fucking chalked in like sardines, that there's a building that tanks have been having a hard time with during the day. So we're going to go assault it at night. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, like, wait a minute, like, hey, this ain't a real tank, brother. Like this, this is like a roller skate that they're calling a tank. Like a real tank was having a hard time with this building. Like, what are we supposed to do? So me and another guy, another squad leader inside that vehicle started coming up with a plan inside of our little box. And now that I think about it, like we had no way to share that plan with the other boxes full of dudes, so we were just going to execute what we were going to execute, so a lot like sort of like a D-Day style landing. So the vehicles pull up to this building. I don't know. I can't see it. But all I can see is the ramp drop. So there's a ramp in the back. So the ramp drops. We all go running out. The previously tough kid that like works as a mechanic inside the vehicle, he's like screaming for the ramp to be pulled back up because he doesn't want to die. He was tough a couple days ago, right? But now that shit's going down, he's like, close the ramp. So we get out and we see this building. And I used to lead rocket gunners, so dudes that fired rockets to blow holes in walls so guys can go through or destroy tanks or something like that. It was basically like a rocket team. So we get out, we see this building. I point a laser that's on my rifle to the building to show my rocket gunner where to shoot. He shoots, and when the dust clears, it doesn't look like anything happened. You're like, well, this isn't good, right? But it's funny because like as soon as like my team fired first, and so as soon as like everybody else heard us fire, they're like, oh, I guess we can shoot now. So like everybody opened up, like the machine guns. Like I get my guy with the rocket to hit the building again. The door comes flipping off the building, like, and I see a big hole in the building. So I'm like, cool, we're good now, right? My job is complete. And the rest of the guys go running into the building while we get the rockets back together. Like, long story short, man, nobody was there. And that continued to happen like throughout my first tour in Iraq. It was like moments of like absolute terror where you think you're going to like run across this place and get shot, only to find out that everybody had already surrendered. So that was the interesting thing about 2003 though was, I mean, that was the first time I'd seen death on like a mass. I mean, I didn't even kill anybody in 2003. There was nobody to kill, man. It was like they all gave up, but the areas that we passed through that had been hit with artillery before us, there was dead bodies everywhere. So like you're driving through we got stuck behind a river or a canal for like a day or two because somebody had blown the bridge ahead of us. Either we did or they did. Somebody had blown the bridge up. So we were putting like that old G.I. Joe style bridge layer thing over the top of it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So we're hanging out behind that. I know who they are now, but I didn't at the time. But the psychological operations dudes are playing like Kid Rock and like Metallica and shit over like loudspeakers. There's helicopters flying overhead, firing off all their ordnance and their rockets and bullets and stuff, turning around and heading back because they're trying to bridge this canal, And once we crossed that canal, there was like dead bodies everywhere. Like just slumped over cars, like in the streets. And I didn't see a ton of weapons now that I think about it.
So just a bunch of dead Iraqis?
Yeah, it's dead Iraqis. Like, I didn't see any small arms during that thing, so I have no idea how those dudes died or who killed them. But
now was Saddam a CIA asset?
He was definitely an ally of the United States. And it seems like he was an ally of the United States right up until he thought it was going to be a good idea to start selling oil and something other than dollars. So
it came back to the oil and the dollars.
Yeah, I think he wanted to. It was something like he either wanted to like the gold dinar was Libya, but Saddam was on another get out from under the petrodollar trip, some sort of I think like a euro or something like that for the area. He messed with the money people.
Saddam, they got rid of him, and then Omar Gaddafi was the next threat when he tried to go and create, the gold current, kind of unite Africa, and they weren't having that either.
No. Yeah, anybody that tries, which is interesting now with this BRICS, because the BRICS already has dropped the petrodollar, right? So they're already moving towards, and those for those of you who aren't tracking BRICS, I'm sure everybody over here is, but Brazil, Russia, India. I'm sorry, I just messed it up. Yeah, no, it's Brazil, Russia, India,
China.
I forgot who the S is. Man, it's 9 o'clock at night. It's 9 o'clock at night.
Venezuela in there?
No, Israel's not.
The Venezuela.
I don't know if they've joined up or not.
I can't remember if they're in it. I think there's a country in Africa too that's involved in that.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one, but yeah. It's always, at the end of the day, it's always oil, and in the background somehow the Federal Reserve,
Yeah.
And when they say we need to go secure something, it's going down. It's like right now, I would just listening to something, and Syria has took back some of their oil fields, and we're actually dropping bombs on them because they want their oil back, but we don't want to give them their oil back. So it's like the United States is over there bombing them to secure their oil, which they are trying to take back. But yet we have oil here, and we're not doing that with the oil here.
Or better yet, like, can we use some hydrogen? Can we definitely drill for oil here, but like, can we use an alternate fuel altogether? But the Iraq thing is definitely interesting, man, because it was so there were no weapons of mass destruction, which they openly say all the time now. Like, you can just find clips of George Bush laughing about, like, oh, no weapons of mass destruction over here, none over here. And everybody just kind of bypasses that little ruse that they pulled about weapons of mass destruction resulted in all those dead Iraqis that I saw that day, and like consecutive days after that. I'm like, well, if there were no weapons of mass destruction, why are we still here? So when I went back to Iraq in 2004, now as a bomb technician, so now I'm actually looking at bombs. I'm blowing up bombs. I'm like, there's no chemical weapons here. Now this is where those same armchair historians will be like, oh, well, they found 3 mustard rounds in the desert somewhere, and you're like, okay, cool. How is that going to hurt America? And then my last deployment to Iraq was 2019 into 2020, January 2020. And it's funny that you brought up that oil field thing in Syria, because while I was there, something was happening where Turkey was going to come down south and do an incursion into like upper, it's like northern. They're trying to push the Kurds out of northern Iraq. So essentially a NATO ally, Turkey, was going to do military operations down into Iraq and I believe northern Syria, which is a problem because NATO countries can't like butt heads, right? So we had to pull a bunch of bases down and operations down away from being in close proximity to the Turks. So that was when they were pulling people out of Syria, but when they decided to stay at the oil fields. So I was working alongside the information operation guys at the time. And the boss, the military boss of the information operations section, we get it on like an emergency VTC, like the video telephone conference. And he's like, hey guys, we need to come up with an official statement of why we're staying in the oil fields. And I'm a civilian at this time. And like, I'm already disgruntled, right? So it was kind of a bummer because I would just ask guys all the time, like, hey, what does this have to do with the Constitution again? And, they're young military dudes. So they're like, man, here goes this old fuck again with this. Like, what are we doing? Aren't you getting paid to be here? But so no, he says we have to come up with something to say of why we're keeping the oil fields. And so literally in the meeting, I'm like, well, why are we keeping them? Like we're not at war with Syria, right? Like this is literally some other dude's shit that we're just attacking. Like I can't even remember like why they even said that we were attacking Syria in the first place, because the rebels were trying to take down Assad, and Assad decided to kill him. I mean, I don't. But then Trump comes out and says like, yeah, hey, literally we're there to take the oil.
Yeah,
like we're keeping the oil. And it's like, yeah. And then, so that swings it back around to your point. It's like, well, we have oil here, so what is this giant destabilization campaign in the Middle East?
When I look at it from the outside looking in, and, you hear these commentaries, and then you think about like the big defense contractors and how much money is being made off of war. It's like, you see Lord of War, And then you hear some of these warmongers in Congress talking about, well, if we give, Ukraine, give up Ukraine, Putin's going to go over there and they got lithium. He's going to give it to China. And then, you find out like, no, Putin is already going to give them the land that had all the lithium. He didn't care about that. It was about you being on his border and the fact that they're not getting bullied and they're not playing the game. And then they actually want to become part of NATO and you didn't want them in NATO because they don't play NATO's game. So then you're an enemy now because you're not agreeing with us. And I'm not pro-Russian, but I'm just saying there's a lot of conversations that aren't heard about that whole Ukraine, Russia, natural resources and, the border and all this stuff and NATO and, all this other propaganda. But it's just like there's always something that has to do with, like you said, destabilization and some type of contracting and some type of exportation, as far as a resource over there. Just out of curiosity, did you ever run across, because in the movie, you always, they have some of these movies, you see like a British oil executive or, some guys over there, they got commercial deals to rebuild the roads or, buildings. Did you ever like ear hustle or come across those situations and hear stuff and be like, man, this is some straight bullshit. These guys over here are getting rich and I'm over here, kind of like doing my thing and, people don't even know the half of it.
Yeah. I started to notice that almost immediately upon going back to Iraq. So I went back in 2004. I think I got back in there like late August, early September 2004. And we flew into this base called Al-Assad. And I think some people just got wounded on Al-Assad. Al-Assad is like an air base in northern Iraq that they always fire rockets at. When we killed Soleimani, that Iranian general, Iran fired some ballistic missiles at Al-Assad. They were polite enough to call ahead first and be like, hey, you boys might want to get in some bunkers because we're sending it, right? So nobody got actually hurt, but so I get back to Al-Assad, dude, and it's like something out of a movie, man. There's like buildings and people like everywhere, and there's a boxing ring set up like in the middle of the camp for like Friday night fights. There's like
what do you mean Friday night fights?
So dudes could get in the ring and sock each other up, like if you got beef with a dude in your unit.
Yeah.
Hey, man, let me get you on this Friday night.
Yeah. That's dope.
And so, like, I get there and I'm walking around and dudes are drinking. So, non-alcoholic beer was a big thing there, like cases of the shit. So, dudes are walking around drinking non-alcoholic beer, smoking cigars, like watching people fight. There's like hundreds of fucking people here, and like everybody's got a gun, but nobody's like, it ain't really serious, And they have a shop. A store, they're like almost the size of like a small Walmart, just chock full of shit. And everybody working in there is like a contractor. So there's Romanian chicks at the time, which word on the street was you could holler at them, But, I never got the correct code phrase, but yeah, man. So I'm just like, what in the fuck, dude? And you start seeing like these large chow halls with people just serving you food. And normally you're like, hey man, don't we have cooks in the military? I thought that was the joke. Like if you messed up on the test, you either became infantry or a cook or something like that. Like, it's even in the Steven Seagal movie Under Siege where he got in trouble as a Navy SEAL. So he has to be a cook,
Oh,
so
yeah. Okay.
He's cooking on the battleship, but he's still a Navy SEAL, So I'm looking around like, what the fuck? And so I get sent to Fallujah. So I spend the rest of my time like basically banging it out in the city. But then towards the end, when we were getting to rotate out, so we were there like 5 months, and towards the end of that 5 months, so this is going into 2005, they were building like the third chow hall on the little base I was at. And people were like, oh, well, let's go to this chow hall because they have ice cream. And this one over here, well, that one's quick. They got like a sandwich line and shit. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I go into the new chow hall, because I heard they got ice cream, man. And dude, like seriously, it's like 31 flavors in this fucking place, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, we just fought in that town Fallujah because ostensibly, they killed some Blackwater contractors. Not ostensibly, that's what they did, right? So some Blackwater contractors were moving through Fallujah, and I mean, these guys had a reputation for being assholes, man. Like they would run cars off the road, you know, because they're afraid of car bombs and shit. It's like, well, if the civilians actually liked you, there wouldn't be any car bombs, you know. Like if it was, they kind of made their own fate there. So these dudes in 2004 got pulled out of their cars by Iraqis that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1, you know, and killed and drug over and hung by a bridge on Fallujah. So because this great embarrassment has happened to not even like U.S. soldiers, you know, these were mercenaries, like American mercenaries got killed. And so that was what like precipitated us going into Fallujah and destroying an entire city because some American contractors didn't know how to drive. Like they weren't smart enough to not drive through a city where people don't like you. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, and by the way, it's their city. And there was no weapons of mass destruction. So it's like, so I began to see it in 2004 to answer your question about like, I never personally, not at that level. At that time, I hadn't personally ran into anybody that was like actually part of like the contracting, like the scheming, you know. It wasn't until I think my second to last deployment, I was shadowing a general around Iraq who was a commanding officer for an agency in the Department of Defense. And this particular agency is one of the lesser known agencies. And it's just like a word salad for its name, you know. And it's mainly responsible for what I've just come to understand is money laundering. You know, it's only a few military personnel in charge of a bunch of contractors, like thousands of them, probably, right? And so what it's supposed to do is something of a liaison between big technology and like the military. You're like, okay, this sounds problematic already. Already sounds like a conflict of interest because because everybody that feeds the military is a private company, you know? So I was going in a helicopter around Iraq with this general. And when we got to the embassy, you know, we had like the above board kind of like conversation. Basically what this guy was doing the entire time was asking like if they needed more equipment. Like, do you need more equipment? Do you need more equipment? And it's like all, just like what's happening in Ukraine right now, all this equipment that we sent over there, like billions of dollars worth of shit, like mostly just sat on a shelf somewhere, or, you know, because the Iraqis can't use it. Like our guys really aren't using it. So it's just, this guy's just over there like fishing for money. And I kind of got the table slap on that when they sort of slid off into an office by themselves afterwards. I'm like, oh, okay. So this is like where they're actually like doing the special handshake and like showing each other the magic ring and shit. And that's when they're saying the real shit back in there.
Officially, I only got one real spanking my entire life. My mom did the best a 14-year-old could do, raising me with love and instilling values that will last a lifetime. I was a straight-A student and lived to make her happy. So how did I go astray? A horrible stepdad that stole my self-worth and invoked fear turned me into a person that I struggled to overcome. From skateboarding to selling drugs, gang banging in juvenile hall, I got caught the same way many young promising men get caught up. I struggled to find my identity, getting mixed up in shootouts, crime, and the adult entertainment industry. This roller coaster continued as I juggled college, hustling, and Hollywood, eventually catching a federal bank robbery case. I found redemption in prison while serving a 120-month federal sentence and came out a man on a mission. I became a social media influencer with over 500 million views on YouTube and a life coach mentoring people all over the world. This is my journey. To pick up a limited edition GTA poster signed by me for $10, or with your purchase of a Wig Splitter Porsche t-shirt, I'll throw in a free poster. They're coming. I gotta hurry up and wash my ass. Go to BigKirk916.com, pick you up a bar of soap, and wash your ass, or else you're gonna be under arrest too. Oh shit.